Emma Brooks was 27, full of life, moving to Austin, Texas, chasing her dream job as a graphic designer. She had big plans: weekend hikes, brunches with friends, late-night projects fueled by iced coffee and her favorite playlists. Life seemed unstoppable until she felt a small lump under her collarbone. At first she ignored it, thinking it was nothing, just a harmless bump. She continued with her routine, going to work, meeting friends, exercising, and planning her life as if nothing had changed. But the lump persisted and started to hurt, and her intuition told her something was wrong. Finally, she made an appointment with her doctor, hoping for reassurance. She sat nervously in the sterile office chair, listening to the doctor examine her. She smiled nervously, trying to act brave, until the doctor said it was probably nothing, but suggested a biopsy to be safe. The next week, she returned to the office to hear the words that would change everything. Lymphoma. The word hit her like a physical blow. She could not breathe. She could not speak. She only sat frozen, trying to comprehend how her life had shifted in an instant. The fear was overwhelming. Her mind raced. She thought of her family, her friends, her plans, her future. She wanted to cry, but could not. She wanted to scream, but had no voice. She felt as if the world was moving around her while she was frozen in time. Her mother was called, and Emma sobbed on the phone, unable to say much, only letting tears flow freely. She wished for a miracle, wishing the lab had made a mistake, wishing that somehow this diagnosis would vanish. She spent sleepless nights searching online, reading survival rates and patient stories, trying not to feel defeated. She was terrified of the unknown, of the treatments, of the pain, and of the life she would have to leave behind. She thought of herself as strong, but the strength she felt before seemed to vanish. She questioned why this was happening to her. Why now? Why at 27? She realized, though, that despair would not help, that she had to face this reality. She had to decide what now. When chemotherapy began, Emma entered a new world, a world filled with strange machines, harsh lights, the smell of antiseptic, and people from all walks of life fighting battles she could not see at first. She felt isolated, overwhelmed, and frightened, but soon she noticed moments of resilience in the room. Children laughing with nurses, sharing stories, older women knitting during infusions, men joking and discussing sports. She realized that life existed even in a place designed for illness. She felt a spark of hope, a connection to these strangers who were living through their own battles. She met fellow patients, sharing tips about coping with nausea, ways to manage pain, and tricks to endure long hours attached to IV lines. She learned small victories mattered, the way a child smiled during a treatment, or how a nurse held a hand to comfort a scared patient. She decided to document her journey, writing daily notes about her experiences, her fears, her hopes, and even the absurdities she encountered in the hospital. She started posting small reflections on Instagram, not for attention, but so someone out there might feel less alone. She described the taste of hospital food, the strange humor patients developed to stay sane, the moments that reminded her she was still human. She wrote about the nurses who treated her like family and the volunteers who brought warmth and companionship. She poured her emotions into words, finding solace and courage in the act of expressing herself. The chemotherapy sessions were grueling. Emma lost her hair in clumps in the shower. Food lost its flavor, and even her reflection in the mirror became a stranger. She hated mirrors and the question, "How are you holding up?" She hated pity and the stares of strangers, but she refused to give in to self-pity. She refused to let cancer define her identity. She repeated quietly to herself each day, "I will survive. I will fight. I will find purpose." She learned to face the harshness of treatment with humor and determination. She discovered strength she did not know she possessed. Small victories became monumental milestones, taking a deep breath before an infusion, smiling at a nurse, sharing a joke with a fellow patient, counting the days of remission each week. Through the difficult days, Emma realized that surviving was not just about beating the disease, but connecting with others. She responded to messages from young girls fighting breast cancer, parents supporting sick children, survivors celebrating milestones, and families mourning loved ones. She learned that her words, even in small posts, carried meaning for others. She felt the weight of responsibility of not only healing herself, but inspiring others. She began to envision a life beyond chemotherapy, a life where she could share her experiences, speak publicly, and advocate for those who felt voiceless. She started planning her recovery and how she could transform her struggle into a mission for others. She dreamed of standing on stages, sharing her story of resilience, courage, and hope, helping people understand the depth of strength humans carry within themselves. She pictured herself helping survivors find community support and inspiring those facing their own battles. She knew it would not be easy, but Emma understood that her story had power that extended beyond herself. Emma spent countless nights journaling, reflecting on her journey, finding words to express pain, hope, fear, and joy. She wrote about the bond formed in hospital rooms, the empathy shared in whispered conversations, the courage found in unlikely places. She realized that true bravery was not in ignoring fear, but in facing it head-on and choosing to live fully despite uncertainty. She nurtured the tiny spark of hope inside her and promised herself that she would become a voice for others. She would share her story without filters, without shame, without fear. She would become the bridge between those lost in darkness and the light of human resilience. Emma began to feel purpose even amidst treatment and suffering. She understood that her journey had already begun to change lives even before her remission, and that the real fight was not just to survive, but to thrive. The months passed, and Emma endured treatment with a determination she did not know she possessed. Each infusion felt like a mountain climbed, a battle survived, a victory earned. She lost more than just her hair. She lost the illusion of invincibility and the carefree life she once knew. Yet through the struggle, she discovered an inner strength that surprised even her. She learned to savor the smallest moments, a warm cup of tea, a hug from her mother, a text from a friend checking in. She found joy in resilience and beauty in persistence. She began to notice how the human spirit could flourish even when the body was weak. She embraced the physical pain as a companion, teaching lessons about endurance, patience, and acceptance. She spent hours walking through hospital corridors, reflecting on life, and planning what she would do when the treatments ended. Emma realized that the emotional toll of cancer was as heavy as the physical. She experienced nights of intense fear when she imagined what might happen when scans revealed results, or when nausea and fatigue threatened to overwhelm her. She could feel despair pressing down on her chest, yet she refused to let it consume her. She journaled her fears, her hopes, her dreams, and her frustrations, pouring every emotion onto paper. She wrote about moments when she laughed despite pain, when she cried without shame, when she connected with fellow patients. She began posting her reflections online, describing the reality of cancer in a way that was raw, honest, and human. She shared the little victories, celebrating the courage of those around her, inspiring them and herself at the same time. Messages began pouring in, people from all over the country sharing their own stories, thanking her for being honest, for being brave, for being a voice they could relate to. Emma realized that she was not alone in her fight, and neither were the people she was reaching out to. During this time, Emma started to envision a life beyond cancer. She imagined herself standing on stages, sharing her story, inspiring others, showing them the strength that could be found even in the darkest moments. She thought about hospitals, schools, and community centers where she could speak. She imagined connecting with survivors, families, and anyone facing hardship, offering hope and guidance. She realized that surviving cancer would not just be about returning to normal life, but transforming her experience into a mission of purpose. She began practicing small speeches, recording herself talking to an imaginary audience, learning how to connect with emotion and connect with people, even through a camera or a page. She discovered that storytelling could be as powerful as medicine, offering healing in ways treatment alone could not. The chemotherapy sessions continued, and Emma's body weakened, but her spirit grew stronger. She adapted to the changes in her appearance, embracing baldness as a symbol of endurance. She experimented with scarves, hats, and colors, finding ways to express herself. She noticed that other patients looked up to her, the way she faced each day with courage and humor, and she felt a responsibility to carry herself with dignity. She shared tips about dealing with side effects, managing emotional turmoil, and staying positive in the midst of uncertainty. Her Instagram followers grew from dozens to hundreds to thousands, people resonating with her honesty and determination. She began to feel a sense of community and purpose that extended far beyond herself. She was no longer just a patient, she was a survivor in training, a messenger of hope. Emma faced setbacks. Some days were unbearable when nausea, fatigue, and pain combined to make even getting out of bed impossible. She felt frustration, loneliness, and fear creeping back in, but she reminded herself that these were temporary obstacles, not definitions of her worth. She turned to meditation, deep breathing, and gentle exercises to center herself. She reached out to other survivors, sharing experiences and advice, learning that healing was not linear and that courage was often found in persistence rather than triumph. She wrote letters to herself, describing her journey, recording every detail of her struggle and victories. She knew that this record would become a source of strength and inspiration, not only for her, but for the people she would eventually reach with her story. As the month went by, Emma started to dream bigger. She envisioned speaking engagements, traveling to different states, sharing her story in hospitals, schools, conferences, and community events. She imagined helping people find hope when they thought none existed, inspiring them to keep going even when life seemed unbearable. She wrote down goals and plans, visualizing the steps needed to turn her personal experience into a platform for advocacy. She considered topics she could address: early detection, emotional resilience, mental health, coping strategies, and community support. She knew that her authenticity would be her greatest asset, and that sharing her truth without embellishment would resonate deeply with audiences. She spent hours preparing her presentations, practicing tone, gestures, and storytelling techniques, learning how to connect with hearts as well as minds. Finally, the day came when scans revealed remission. Emma could hardly believe it after months of pain, uncertainty, and perseverance. Her body had endured, and her spirit had grown stronger. Her mind buzzed with ideas about how to transform the survival into purpose. She immediately began reaching out to hospitals, community centers, and schools offering to speak. She knew that the path ahead would require courage in a new way, stepping into public spaces, vulnerable and exposed, sharing intimate details with strangers. But she felt ready. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here. Every moment of fear, every tear, every small victory had prepared her for this mission. She realized that survival was not the end of the story, but the beginning of a chapter in which she could make a difference in the lives of others. Emma began her first speeches, small, intimate settings where she could connect directly with audiences. She shared her journey from diagnosis to treatment to remission, offering practical advice, coping strategies, and, above all, hope. She noticed the reactions people had, their tears, their smiles, their nods of understanding, and she realized the power of shared experience. She found gratitude that her suffering could be transformed into something meaningful. She continued to post reflections online, documenting her experiences as a speaker, inspiring those who could not attend her talks in person. She began to build a platform, a community of survivors, advocates, and supporters united by the desire to transform pain into purpose. She embraced the role of motivational speaker, understanding that her authenticity, empathy, and courage were the tools that would make her story resonate. Emma knew that the journey ahead would not always be easy. There would be days of doubt, fear, and exhaustion, but she felt equipped to face them. She learned that bravery was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. She discovered that her story had the power to heal, to inspire, and to connect. She realized that survival was a gift, but purpose was a responsibility, and she was ready to embrace both. She reflected on the past months, acknowledging her growth and resilience, preparing herself for the challenges and triumphs that lay ahead, and understanding that the true measure of strength is not in avoiding hardship, but in rising every time one falls. Emma's first speaking engagement was in a small community center in Austin, Texas. She felt her heart racing as she entered the room carrying only a folder of notes and a determination to be honest. She saw a crowd of faces, some curious, some skeptical, some quietly hopeful. She took a deep breath and began speaking, telling her story from the first day she noticed the lump under her collarbone to the long chemotherapy sessions, the sleepless nights, the fear, the pain, and the moments of unexpected joy. She described losing her hair and finding courage in baldness, the exhaustion that made simple tasks monumental, and the small victories that reminded her she was alive. She shared how journaling, posting reflections online, and connecting with other patients helped her survive, and how she discovered a purpose beyond survival. The audience listened silently at first, hanging on her every word, absorbing the raw honesty of her journey. She could see the emotion in their eyes, the nods, the tears, the way some clutched their hands as if grounding themselves. She realized in that moment that her story had power that went beyond her own healing. She noticed a woman in the back wiping her eyes and a young girl holding her mother's hand. Emma felt a connection stronger than she had ever experienced. Online messages were one thing, but standing in a room with people who were feeling her words in real time was transformative. She spoke about resilience, courage, hope, and the importance of finding meaning in struggle. She encouraged the audience to face their fears, to seek support, to embrace vulnerability, and to recognize the strength within themselves. She emphasized that bravery was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. After the speech, people approached her with hugs, tears, and stories of their own. Some were survivors, sharing gratitude. Some were families supporting loved ones. Some were individuals facing hardships. Emma listened to each story, giving her full attention, offering encouragement and empathy. She realized that these encounters were as healing for her as for the people she met. She spent hours answering questions, sharing coping strategies, and offering reassurance. She began to understand that being a motivational speaker meant more than delivering words. It meant creating space for connection and understanding. It meant being fully present for those who needed hope and guidance. She felt a deep sense of responsibility and privilege knowing that her experiences could help others navigate their own challenges. Emma began receiving invitations to speak at hospitals, schools, universities, and conferences. She traveled to different states, sharing her journey with diverse audiences, people facing illness, trauma, loss, and personal struggle. She tailored each presentation to resonate with the audience, addressing their specific needs, fears, and aspirations. She developed workshops helping participants explore resilience techniques, mindfulness exercises, goal setting, and self-care strategies. She emphasized the power of community and support networks, encouraging attendees to seek connection and to offer support to others. She shared her own mistakes and vulnerabilities, demonstrating that strength came from persistence, learning, and embracing imperfection. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Emma started receiving messages from survivors, parents, educators, students, and professionals thanking her for sharing her story. She noticed that her influence extended beyond individual interactions. People were inspired to start support groups, advocate for patient rights, share their own stories, and engage in community service. She realized that her personal journey was becoming a catalyst for collective healing. She continued posting reflections, videos, and inspirational messages online, reaching people who could not attend her events. She felt a sense of fulfillment she had never experienced before, knowing that her survival had become a source of hope and empowerment for countless individuals. As Emma's schedule grew, she faced new challenges, balancing travel, speaking engagements, social media presence, and personal life. She experienced moments of fatigue, self-doubt, and fear of inadequacy, but she reminded herself of the resilience she had cultivated during treatment. She implemented routines to care for her mental and physical health, meditation, journaling, exercise, and connecting with loved ones. She sought mentorship from experienced speakers and therapists, learning techniques to manage stress and enhance her impact. She embraced the reality that growth and learning were continuous processes and that her mission required both courage and sustainability. Emma's speeches evolved, incorporating storytelling exercises, audience participation, and multimedia presentations. She used visuals, music, and personal artifacts to convey emotion and deepen engagement. She encouraged participants to write letters to themselves, reflecting on their journeys to identify their strengths and aspirations. She guided groups through visualization exercises, imagining overcoming challenges and achieving goals. She observed the transformation in the room, the way individuals straightened their posture, smiled more confidently, and expressed renewed determination. She realized that empowerment was not given, it was nurtured through reflection, connection, practice, and encouragement. Emma also began collaborating with hospitals and nonprofit organizations, creating programs to support patients and families navigating illness. She organized workshops on coping strategies, mindfulness, creative expression, and community building. She partnered with medical professionals advocating for patient-centered care, mental health resources, and early detection awareness campaigns. She used her platform to highlight systemic issues and solutions, helping people understand the importance of advocacy in addition to personal resilience. She discovered that her voice could influence policy, funding, and awareness-raising initiatives, creating change on multiple levels. Through these experiences, Emma continued to grow as a speaker and advocate. She refined her message, focusing on authenticity, empathy, and actionable guidance. She embraced vulnerability, sharing moments of fear, failure, and doubt, demonstrating that courage was dynamic and multifaceted. She recognized that her journey had shifted from personal survival to collective empowerment. She felt a profound sense of purpose, understanding that each interaction, each speech, each connection contributed to a ripple effect of hope, resilience, and change. She celebrated every success, small or large, recognizing the importance of acknowledging progress and cultivating gratitude. Emma's story was no longer just about cancer survival. It was about transformation, personal growth, empowerment, and community. She inspired audiences to confront their fears, embrace uncertainty, find meaning in struggle, and connect with others in authentic ways. She continued writing, posting, speaking, and advocating, understanding that her mission was ongoing and evolving. She reflected on the path that had brought her here, the fear, the pain, the perseverance, the support, and the lessons learned, and she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She understood that life after survival was not simply a return to normalcy, but a journey into purpose, impact, and legacy. Emma's reputation as a motivational speaker grew beyond local communities. She received invitations to speak at universities, hospitals, conferences, and TEDx events across the country. She felt nervous excitement and a deep sense of responsibility with each opportunity, stepping onto larger stages with bigger audiences. She prepared meticulously, rehearsing every word, practicing her tone, gestures, and pacing, imagining the impact her story could have. She wanted to reach hearts, not just ears, to inspire action and reflection, to create connection and empathy. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the sleepless nights, the pain, the fear, the perseverance, and the small victories that had shaped her resilience. She knew that authenticity would be her greatest tool and that vulnerability was her bridge to others. Her TEDx talk was scheduled in a bright auditorium in San Francisco. Emma stepped behind the podium, looking at the sea of faces, hundreds of people waiting to hear her story. She took a deep breath, remembering her first small speech in a community center when she had thought no one would care, but now the room was full of anticipation, hope, and curiosity. She began speaking, narrating her journey from the moment she discovered the lump under her collarbone to the grueling months of chemotherapy, the isolation, the exhaustion, the moments of despair, and the moments of unexpected joy. She described how she used journaling, posting reflections online, and connecting with other patients to survive. She spoke about losing her hair and finding courage in baldness, about finding purpose beyond survival, and embracing life with renewed perspective. The audience was silent at first, hanging on her every word. But soon, the room shifted energy. People leaning forward, nodding silently, wiping tears off cheeks. Emma could feel their connection in the way they responded to her emotions. She spoke about resilience, courage, hope, and the importance of embracing vulnerability. She shared practical strategies for coping with adversity: mindfulness, visualization, goal setting, and building support networks. She emphasized that bravery was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. She shared stories of the people she had met along her journey: survivors, parents, educators, children, volunteers, and the way their courage had inspired her to continue. She reminded the audience that every person has the capacity to overcome challenges, and that connection, empathy, and action could transform lives. After the TEDx talk, Emma was approached by attendees, hugging her, sharing their own stories, some crying, some smiling, some speaking softly with gratitude. She listened attentively, acknowledging their experiences, validating their emotions, and offering encouragement. She realized that the impact of her story extended far beyond the stage, each interaction a thread in a larger tapestry of healing and empowerment. She felt gratitude that her survival had become a vehicle for hope. She began to notice that people were inspired not only to change their own lives, but to support others, advocate for health and wellness, share stories, and engage in community service. She understood that her story had catalyzed a ripple effect of transformation. Following the TEDx talk, Emma received requests from hospitals, schools, and organizations to develop workshops and programs. She collaborated with medical professionals, counselors, educators, and community leaders, designing initiatives that focused on resilience, coping strategies, creative expression, early detection awareness, and mental health support. She led group sessions, guiding participants through reflection exercises, storytelling activities, and mindfulness practices. She encouraged individuals to explore their strengths, identify personal goals, and envision steps to overcome challenges. She noticed profound shifts in participants: the way their posture changed, the brightness in their eyes, the confidence in their voices, and the sense of renewed purpose. Emma recognized that empowerment was nurtured through guided exploration, connection, and encouragement, rather than imposed advice. Emma continued to travel frequently, speaking in different states, sharing her message with diverse audiences. She encountered people facing illness, trauma, grief, loss, personal setbacks, and adversity. She tailored each presentation to address the specific needs, fears, and aspirations of the audience. She emphasized the universality of struggle and the capacity for resilience. She encouraged people to support each other, to seek guidance, to embrace vulnerability, and to take small, consistent steps toward personal growth. She continued to share reflections, videos, and inspirational messages online, reaching people who could not attend events in person. She built a community, a network of survivors, advocates, volunteers, and supporters connected by shared purpose and hope. The demands of travel, public speaking, and online engagement were challenging. Emma faced moments of fatigue, self-doubt, and fear of inadequacy. She recognized that sustainability required balance. She implemented routines to nurture her physical, mental, and emotional health. Meditation, journaling, exercise, and connecting with loved ones became anchors. She sought mentorship from experienced speakers and therapists, learning strategies to enhance impact, manage stress, and cultivate resilience. She understood that personal growth and mission fulfillment required continuous learning, reflection, and self-care. Emma's presentations evolved, incorporating storytelling exercises, audience participation, multimedia elements, and interactive reflection. She used visuals, music, and personal artifacts to convey emotion and deepen engagement. She guided participants through letter writing, visualization exercises, and personal storytelling, encouraging self-discovery, resilience, and community support. She observed transformations, the way individuals straightened their posture, smiled confidently, expressed gratitude, and shared insights with peers. She realized that creating space for empowerment required presence, attentiveness, empathy, and authenticity. She continued to refine her approach, learning from each experience, adjusting delivery style, content, and engagement methods to maximize impact. Through her work, Emma also focused on advocacy and systemic change. She collaborated with hospitals, nonprofits, and community organizations, creating programs for patients, families, and caregivers. She advocated for patient-centered care, mental health resources, early detection awareness, and equitable access to treatment. She shared her personal story to highlight gaps in care, inspire policy change, and raise awareness. She leveraged her platform to educate communities on resilience and empowerment, showing how individual stories can influence collective action. Emma understood her story had catalyzed a ripple effect of transformation. Emma reflected on the journey from her diagnosis to this point. She remembered the fear, the pain, the perseverance, the small victories, the support of strangers, friends, and family, the connections forged, and the lessons learned. She understood that survival had been the first chapter and purpose the second, that her journey had transformed from coping with illness to inspiring change, guiding others, empowering communities. She celebrated the growth, resilience, and impact, recognizing that the story continued to unfold with every speech, every workshop, every interaction, every message shared online or in person. She embraced the responsibility, privilege, and fulfillment that came with turning survival into purpose and transformation. Emma's work began to attract attention beyond the stages and hospitals she had visited. She started receiving emails from national media outlets, invitations for interviews, podcasts, articles, and features on television. She felt a mix of excitement, nervousness, and responsibility as her story was reaching millions of people she never imagined. She realized that this visibility could amplify her mission and inspire even more lives. She carefully prepared for interviews, sharing her journey with authenticity and compassion, highlighting resilience, courage, hope, and the importance of mental health and community support. She emphasized the power of shared experience, the lessons learned through adversity, and the potential for transformation in every person. As she traveled to studios and recorded podcasts, she noticed the effect her story had on audiences far beyond the room. She received messages from people in different states, countries, even continents, telling her how her courage inspired them to face their own challenges. She understood that her visibility could amplify her mission and inspire even more lives. She understood that her experiences were creating a global ripple effect, a network of hope and empowerment that transcended borders. She felt a deep sense of purpose and responsibility, knowing that millions were listening to her words and that every word could have a profound impact on someone's life. She continued to focus on authenticity, empathy, and practical guidance, making sure her story resonated and inspired action. Emma partnered with nonprofits focused on cancer research, patient support, mental health advocacy, and youth empowerment. She collaborated on campaigns raising awareness about early detection, prevention, and access to treatment. She participated in fundraising initiatives, volunteer programs, mentorship projects, and community building activities. She used her platform to connect individuals with resources, support networks, and professionals. She helped survivors navigate challenges beyond treatment, including reintegration into daily life, emotional recovery, and finding purpose after illness. She realized that the scope of her impact had expanded from personal survival to national advocacy, systemic change, and collective empowerment. Her schedule grew intense with speaking engagements, media appearances, workshops, and collaborations. She faced moments of exhaustion, self-doubt, and fear of inadequacy. She reminded herself of the resilience cultivated during treatment and the lessons learned about persistence, courage, and self-care. She implemented routines, including meditation, journaling, reflection, exercise, and rest, ensuring she could sustain her mission without burnout. She sought guidance from mentors, therapists, and colleagues, learning strategies to balance impact with well-being. She embraced the understanding that vulnerability, courage, and leadership were ongoing practices requiring reflection, adaptation, and care. Emma's presentations continued to evolve, incorporating storytelling, exercises, audience engagement, interactive multimedia, and collaborative workshops. She used visuals, personal artifacts, music, and personal narratives to convey emotion and connect deeply with audiences. She guided participants through letter writing, visualization, and goal setting, encouraging reflection, resilience, empowerment, and community support. She noticed transformation in the room, the way participants straightened posture, expressed confidence, shared insights, and supported one another. She realized that authentic connection, empathy, and attentive presence were essential to fostering empowerment and resilience. She continued refining her approach, drawing lessons from every engagement to enhance impact and connection. Through her advocacy, Emma focused on structural change, partnering with hospitals, research institutions, nonprofits, and policymakers. She raised awareness about gaps in care, mental health resources, early detection programs, and equitable access to treatment. She shared her story to humanize systemic issues, inspire funding initiatives, policy reforms, and educational programs. She emphasized the importance of combining personal resilience with advocacy action and community engagement. She discovered that her voice could influence more than individuals. It could shape communities, policies, and opportunities, creating sustainable change for patients, survivors, and families. Emma reflected on her journey, remembering the fear of diagnosis, the grueling treatments, the isolation, and the small victories. She acknowledged the support of friends, family, mentors, and strangers who had helped her navigate challenges. She recognized that survival was only the first chapter of her journey. Purpose, empowerment, and advocacy were the subsequent chapters. She celebrated the growth, resilience, impact, and fulfillment that had emerged from her experience. She embraced the responsibility and privilege of turning suffering into hope, of transforming pain into inspiration, of helping others find strength in their own lives. Even amidst recognition and success, Emma remained grounded. She continued journaling, reflecting on personal growth, lessons learned, challenges faced, and moments of gratitude. She maintained connections with fellow survivors, patients, and supporters, understanding that continued engagement nurtured both her mission and personal fulfillment. She used reflection to ensure authenticity, staying aligned with her purpose and values. She celebrated small victories along the way, the emails from survivors, the smiles of participants, the successful programs, and the stories of lives touched. She knew that each small impact contributed to a larger ripple effect, creating lasting change beyond her immediate reach. Emma's story now encompassed survival, resilience, empowerment, advocacy, and community transformation. She inspired individuals and organizations to face challenges, embrace vulnerability, connect authentically, support one another, and pursue purpose. She demonstrated that adversity could be a catalyst for personal growth, social impact, and collective empowerment. She understood that life after survival was not merely a return to normalcy, but an opportunity to lead, inspire, and leave a meaningful legacy. As Emma's influence grew, she encountered new challenges, balancing visibility, advocacy, travel, speaking engagements, and personal life. She faced moments of self-doubt, wondering if she was doing enough, if her message was resonating, if she was truly making a difference. She struggled with the weight of expectation, the pressure to constantly inspire, the fear of failing those who relied on her, and the emotional toll of constantly revisiting her own trauma. She realized that the journey of survival had evolved into a lifelong mission that required resilience, patience, reflection, and self-care. She reminded herself that vulnerability was not weakness, that honesty with herself and others was strength, and that maintaining balance was essential to sustaining her purpose. Emma continued to speak at hospitals, schools, conferences, and workshops, traveling across the country, sharing her story. She met people whose lives had been changed by her words and actions, survivors finding courage to pursue treatment, families gaining hope to support loved ones, educators learning how to address emotional struggles, and communities inspired to create supportive networks. She felt profound gratitude witnessing the impact of her story on real lives and understanding that each encounter was part of a larger ripple of change. She reflected on the moments of doubt and realized that they were natural human experiences that required acknowledgement, reflection, and adaptation rather than avoidance. The emotional demands of advocacy were intense. Emma often carried the stories of others in her heart, feeling their pain alongside her own. She experienced moments of compassion fatigue, moments when the cumulative weight of suffering and struggle became overwhelming. She learned to manage this through reflection, journaling, meditation, exercise, and reconnecting with loved ones. She sought guidance from mentors, counselors, and peers, learning techniques to maintain resilience, sustain energy, and preserve authenticity. She recognized that caring for herself was essential not only for her well-being, but also to continue serving others effectively. She embraced the understanding that personal growth and advocacy required ongoing attention to mental, physical, and emotional health. Emma's presentations evolved to include interactive storytelling, collaborative exercises, and reflective practices. She guided audiences through visualization, journaling, letter writing, and group discussion, encouraging personal exploration, resilience, and connection. She noticed transformation in the room, the way individuals stood taller, spoke with more confidence, expressed gratitude, and supported one another. She understood that empowerment was cultivated through shared experience, presence, empathy, and encouragement. She continued refining her approach, incorporating lessons from each engagement, adapting content, delivery, and engagement strategies to enhance connection and impact. Through media appearances, Emma raised awareness on a national level, addressing systemic issues such as gaps in mental health support, early detection programs, equitable access to treatment, and patient-centered care. She collaborated with nonprofits, hospitals, policymakers, and community organizations to develop programs, initiatives, and campaigns that empowered patients, families, and communities. She highlighted the importance of combining personal resilience with advocacy action, emphasizing that each individual story could contribute to collective change. She discovered that her voice could influence policy, funding, educational initiatives, and social awareness, creating sustainable impact beyond immediate audiences. Emma reflected deeply on her own journey, remembering the fear, pain, and uncertainty of diagnosis, the grueling treatments, the isolation, and the small victories. She acknowledged the support of friends, family, mentors, and strangers who had helped her navigate challenges. She recognized that survival was only the first chapter of her journey, and that purpose, advocacy, and community transformation were the chapters that followed. She celebrated the growth, resilience, impact, and fulfillment that had emerged from her experience. She embraced the responsibility and privilege of turning personal suffering into hope, inspiration, and tangible change. Even with growing recognition, Emma remained grounded, returning often to quiet reflection, journaling, and meditation. She maintained personal connections with fellow survivors, patients, and supporters, nurturing relationships that provided authenticity, grounding, and perspective. She celebrated small victories daily, the emails and messages from survivors, the smiles of participants, the success of programs and initiatives, and the stories of lives touched. She understood that each interaction contributed to a larger ripple effect, creating lasting change that extended far beyond her immediate reach. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that her survival had become a catalyst for hope, courage, empowerment, and transformation. Emma's journey had now expanded beyond her own life. It encompassed empowerment, advocacy, education, and social change. She inspired individuals and communities to confront challenges, embrace vulnerability, seek connection, pursue purpose, and support one another. She demonstrated that adversity could be a catalyst for personal growth, social impact, and collective transformation. She recognized that life after survival was not a return to normalcy, but an ongoing opportunity to lead, inspire, empower, and leave a meaningful legacy. She reflected on her evolution from a young woman facing lymphoma to a national speaker, advocate, mentor, and agent of change, confident in the knowledge that her story would continue to resonate and inspire courage, hope, and resilience. Emma's work began to achieve nationwide recognition. Invitations to speak at conferences, universities, hospitals, and corporate events increased dramatically. She traveled across the country sharing her story to audiences large and small, witnessing firsthand the impact of her message on diverse groups of people. She saw survivors finding courage to pursue treatment, families learning to support loved ones, educators discovering new ways to address emotional challenges, and communities inspired to develop support networks. She felt a profound sense of fulfillment observing how her journey of survival had evolved into a mission of empowerment, advocacy, and collective resilience. Her programs expanded beyond speeches. Emma collaborated with nonprofits, hospitals, research institutions, and community organizations to create workshops, initiatives, mentorship programs, and awareness campaigns. She focused on early detection, education, mental health support, patient advocacy, and community empowerment. She guided participants through interactive storytelling exercises, visualization, journaling, and collaborative activities, encouraging reflection, resilience, connection, and action. She noticed transformation in the room, the way people straightened their posture, expressed confidence, shared insights, supported one another, and discovered inner strength. She realized that authentic connection, empathy, and presence were fundamental to fostering empowerment and change. Her media appearances continued to grow. Her story featured on podcasts, television programs, news articles, and social media platforms, reaching millions. She shared insights about resilience, purpose, vulnerability, and empowerment, highlighting the importance of community support and advocacy. She spoke openly about the challenges of balancing visibility, public engagement, and personal well-being, offering guidance to others navigating adversity. She emphasized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it, and that meaningful change could be achieved by combining personal resilience with collective advocacy. She understood that her voice could influence awareness, policy, funding, and programs, creating sustainable impact. Even with recognition, Emma faced moments of fatigue, self-doubt, and emotional overwhelm. The demands of travel, speaking engagements, program development, and media appearances required careful management. She implemented routines to maintain balance and sustain energy. Meditation, journaling, exercise, reflection, and connection with loved ones became essential. She sought mentorship and professional guidance to navigate challenges effectively while preserving authenticity. She realized that caring for herself was vital to continue serving others, and that resilience required continuous attention, mental, physical, and emotional, mental well-being. Her journey now encompassed personal survival, empowerment, public advocacy, national recognition, and systemic impact. She inspired individuals, communities, and organizations to confront challenges, embrace vulnerability, pursue purpose, support one another, and cultivate resilience. She demonstrated that individual stories could catalyze collective impact. Emma stood on the stage one last time for the evening conference in New York City, the auditorium buzzing with anticipation. Hundreds of faces turned toward her. She felt the weight of every moment that had brought her here. The fear, the pain, the treatments, the victories, the letters, messages, calls, and meetings that had shaped her journey. She took a deep breath, recalling the moment she first discovered the lump under her collarbone, the diagnosis that had shattered her sense of invincibility, the chemotherapy sessions that had pushed her body and spirit to the limit, and the nights of doubt and fear that had threatened to overwhelm her. She remembered the small victories, the laughs with fellow patients, the journals, the posts online, the connections she had formed, and the realization that survival was only the first chapter of her story. As she began to speak, Emma narrated the journey that had transformed her life, from a young woman facing uncertainty to a national motivational speaker and advocate. She shared the moments of fear, the physical and emotional challenges of treatment, the isolation and exhaustion, the despair that sometimes threatened to take over, and the unexpected moments of joy, courage, and resilience. She spoke about the connections forged with other survivors, patients, families, and supporters, the lessons learned about empathy, authenticity, and the human spirit. She described how journaling, sharing reflections online, and reaching out to others had transformed her experience and given her purpose beyond survival. She emphasized that adversity could be a catalyst for personal growth, empowerment, and connection, and that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. The audience listened intently, some leaning forward, some closing their eyes, some holding hands and taking notes. Emma could feel the energy in the room, the silent acknowledgement of struggle and hope, the shared understanding of pain and triumph. She shared stories of people she had met during her travels, survivors fighting treatment, families supporting loved ones, students and educators inspired to act, volunteers and professionals dedicating themselves to change. She emphasized the importance of connection, community support, advocacy, and the belief that every person could make a difference in their own life and the lives of others. She encouraged the audience to embrace vulnerability, to seek support, to celebrate small victories, and to turn personal challenges into opportunities for growth and contribution. After the speech, attendees approached her, sharing stories, tears, gratitude, smiles, and quiet reflections. Emma listened attentively, each person's experience resonating deeply with her. She offered encouragement, empathy, understanding, and practical guidance. She realized that the impact of her story extended far beyond what she could see, each conversation creating ripples of hope and transformation. She felt gratitude witnessing the courage and resilience of others inspired by her journey, and understood that her mission had evolved into a collective movement of empowerment, connection, and advocacy. In the following weeks, Emma continued traveling, speaking, collaborating with nonprofits, hospitals, community organizations, and educational institutions. She developed workshops, initiatives, mentorship programs, and awareness campaigns focusing on early detection, mental health support, patient advocacy, and community empowerment. She guided participants through exercises in reflection, storytelling, goal setting, visualization, and mindfulness, fostering personal growth, connection, and resilience. She witnessed transformation in real time, seeing people develop confidence, uncover inner strength, support one another, and take tangible steps to improve their lives and communities. She recognized that empowerment was cultivated through authenticity, empathy, shared experience, and persistent engagement, rather than simple instruction or advice. Emma's media presence continued to expand, bringing national recognition. She participated in interviews, podcasts, television features, and social media campaigns, sharing insights on resilience, purpose, vulnerability, empowerment, and advocacy. She used her platform to educate communities about systemic gaps in care, early detection resources, mental health support, and patient advocacy. She demonstrated that combining personal resilience with collective action could catalyze significant change. She observed the far-reaching effects of her story, inspiring people to advocate, volunteer, mentor, support others, and create meaningful impact in their own communities. Despite growing recognition, Emma remained grounded. She prioritized reflection, journaling, meditation, and connection with loved ones. She celebrated milestones, the success of programs, letters, messages, and feedback from participants, and the tangible transformations she witnessed in audiences. She reflected on her growth, understanding that purpose was an evolving journey that required continuous learning, adaptation, and dedication. She embraced the responsibility and privilege of using her story to inspire hope, courage, resilience, empowerment, and meaningful change in her own life and in the lives of others. She understood that her mission was larger than herself, and that each interaction, every message, and every program was part of a ripple creating lasting transformation. Emma finally reflected on the entirety of her journey, from the day she discovered the lump to the present moment. She acknowledged the fear, pain, perseverance, small victories, support, and lessons learned. She recognized that survival had been the beginning, that her mission had expanded to advocacy, empowerment, and systemic impact. She celebrated the profound growth, resilience, fulfillment, and influence that had emerged from her experience. She embraced the reality that life after survival was not a return to normalcy, but an opportunity to lead, inspire, empower, and leave a meaningful legacy. She understood that her story would continue to resonate, inspiring hope, courage, resilience, and transformation in countless lives far beyond what she could imagine. As she looked out at the audience one final time, Emma felt peace, gratitude, fulfillment, and joy. She knew that she had transformed her pain into purpose, her survival into empowerment, and her journey into inspiration. She understood that adversity had forged strength, empathy, and courage within her, and that sharing her story had created ripples of change across individuals, communities, and systems. She felt complete, knowing that she had embraced life fully, turned suffering into hope, and left a lasting impact. She stepped off the stage confident that her story would continue to inspire others to rise, face challenges, embrace resilience, connect authentically, pursue purpose, and create transformation in their own lives.